Hi there, my name is Ron Rogers, and this presentation is titled Cessna Wallace Flight Test Tales. I'm sorry, was a dead stick landing on I-135 north of Wichita in the test cards? This occurred back in January of 1980, and uh, I was brand new to Cessna Flight Test, and Craig Davis was telling this story. Now, this happened to Craig a long time ago, 43 years ago, and at the time he was a young pilot. 24 years old, had under 1,000 hours of flight time, and here he is in the right seat doing flight test work on a Cessna Citation. Now, the funny thing is, Craig's sitting there telling this tale, and he's keeping track of the test cards and taking down data and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, he hears the door seal go out, and the aircraft depressurizes. And he says to Rick, the pilot, he says, "We've lost pressurization." Well, Rick says we've lost a hell of a lot more than that. Now, Wichita is the air capital, and you've got Cessna, Boeing, Beech, Learjet. I mean, you've got a lot of people there. So the paper in the town, they're fairly friendly to aviation activities. So the write-up in the paper actually was pretty good. Now they did one heck of a job landing this aircraft on the interstate. There had been a little bit over a foot of snow, and this was one of the few places where you could safely put it down, in spite of having a few vehicles on the road. And of course, that's always a consideration. But if they would have landed this off airport, probably would have gone fairly bad. But the funny thing is, the newspaper handled it fairly well. Sir, how fast were you going? We got you left a center line here, and you don't have a muffler, and you were going over 55. Did you know that? So anyway, they put it down on the southbound lane of I-135, and they fortunately missed the cars and didn't do any damage. So it's quite an interesting tale. Now there's the fuel panel down in the lower left. All right. So here you have the fuel system. Fairly straightforward. Left tank, left engine, right tank, right engine. Cross feed is necessary for fuel balance. Pretty straightforward. Now, this test mission was to determine minimum in-flight usable fuel. And there are three conditions required to determine this, and they take the highest value of the three to give you your in-flight unusable fuel. Now, the first test point is level flight with rudder inputs. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy to do. You want to try to unport it, basically the intake, and you do that by putting some rudder inputs in. So that's giving you, the most accurate value. The second point is a descent, and you're descending at 15 degrees nose down. This was accomplished on test flight number 2. Now, for these test flights, you take off with essentially minimum fuel. I mean, you have legal reserves, but you don't want to drive all day till you run out of fuel. You want to have a fairly low amount in the tank so you can get to the test point pretty quickly. So what you do is you take off with 900 on the left and 300 on the right, because you have a 600-pound imbalance. Now, the third test point is the climb attitude, 15 degrees pitch up. And this was the point that started to cause a few problems. Well, this test point seems fairly straightforward, but it's got a few gotchas. You are doing the test conditions between 10,000 feet and 17.5. You got to stay out of Class A airspace. So you've got a narrow band. This is a jet aircraft. It climbs fairly nicely, and you're doing a 15-degree pitch attitude during the climb. So you set this thing up, you start the climb. Well, the engine doesn't flame out. Okay, we got to go back down, start over again. So you pull the power back down, but you don't want it to flame out in the descent. So you transfer just a little bit of fuel. You start the test point again. You climb on up. The engine doesn't flame out this time. And part of the contributing factor to this could have been the fact that the crossfeed pump was a little more capable than they had kind of imagined. It transferred fuel at a faster rate than they had anticipated. So they were pulling more fuel out of the left side than they kind of had planned on. And So they do the third point, don't get it. The fourth point, don't get it. Well, they're concentrating on getting this thing right, and the gauges, the fuel gauges, are not very accurate in 15 degrees nose up and nose down pitch attitude. So they're not getting a very accurate reading here, but they're trying to get the test point. And on the seventh iteration, and this was kind of part of the problem, they let this go too long. They're focusing on getting the data. On the seventh test point, yep, they got that right engine to flame out. Well, unfortunately, the left one went too. They had ended up exhausting all of the fuel. So here's where, of course, it gets interesting. Rick tries to restart both engines. Well, that doesn't work. There's no fuel. We're not going to get a restart. So it's okay, where do we land? Well, they had gotten snow, a little bit over a foot, and you look down there and you see this nice interstate. Of course, you got the situation of cars. You know, you can't make a danger to somebody else to get you out of a problem. So you have to be very careful of that. Fortunately, the traffic was light, and they set up really good crew coordination. They earned a lot of respect from us guys back in the flight test community, and even from management, because they did save the aircraft. So Craig's on the guard calling Mayday, Mayday. McConnell Tower, which is the Air Force military base on the east side of town, hears that. They have a rescue helicopter airborne, so they send that thing on out. They did a really good job, crew coordination, CRM, all that good stuff, picking out the point, setting up for it, and Rick just did an excellent job of landing. Now, the lanes itself are a little tight. I mean, this aircraft has a fairly decent wingspan, and they put up these little posts with the reflectors so they can see where the edge of the highway is and for plowing snow and stuff like that. And they missed those just by a mere inches. They landed over one of the cars, and they were kind of concerned about it. They had some older ladies in that, and the older ladies came up, and they were concerned about these guys if they were all right. But they successfully put it down. Didn't hurt a thing, didn't hurt the airplane, didn't hurt anybody on the ground. And, of course, the police came out fairly quickly. Well, okay, they're on the interstate. Well, they get clearance to be able to take off, but they need fuel. Well, Cessna has a fuel truck, but it's really only operated on the airport, so it doesn't have license plates. So what they quick do is they pull some license plates off another truck, put it on this fuel truck, drive it up there, fuel it up. Fortunately, as you can imagine, there's a lot of police, all sorts of jurisdictions around, and thank goodness nobody decided to run the plates to see if that actually belonged to the fuel truck. So they fueled it up. And Craig said one of the interesting things was taking off and climbing out over an overpass on the interstate. And they, of course, brought the aircraft back, and they lived to fly another day. So it was a very interesting story that I thought my people who follow my channel might enjoy. And Craig was very gracious in allowing me to tell his story, because, you know, a story like this, it's kind of eating a little bit of humble pie, you know, but he figured 43 years later, he's kind of over it. But it's an interesting story, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening.